One of these men lit himself on fire on live television. Another once broke up a real gang fight between extras. And number 6, he destroyed his entire face, then smiled about it. You think actors are soft? Think again. Bronson's prison yard training. He didn't grow up with movie dreams. Charles Brunson grew up with a shovel. Born in 1921 in a Pennsylvania coal town, he was one of 15 children. The family spoke Lithuanian at home and didn't have running water. By age 10, he was working in the mines to help buy food. After World War II, where he served as a tail gunner in the Air Force, Bronson drifted west and tried acting. He wasn't polished. He wasn't charming. Studios didn't know what to do with him. He had the look of someone who'd been in real fights. Because he had. Most actors trained at private gyms. Bronson didn't. He worked out in prison yards. Real ones. He trained with ex-cons and day laborers who didn't care about technique, just strength and grit. He wanted to look like he could hurt someone. And he did. Push-ups on gravel. Rope climbs with no gloves. Makeshift weights made from scrap metal. No music. No mirrors. Just bruises and calluses. That's how he built the body you see on screen. By the mid-1950s, he started landing small parts. War movies, westerns, tough guy roles. Directors didn't cast him for dialogue. They cast him because when he looked at you, it felt like a threat. On set, he refused stunt doubles. Said they were a waste of time. During a fight scene in The Magnificent Seven, he accidentally knocked another actor out cold. They kept filming. The crew didn't even blink. He didn't talk much. Didn't smile unless he had to. Didn't care if you liked him. He came to work, did the job, and left. Simple as that. Clint Eastwood once said Bronson wasn't acting. That's just how he was. Bronson didn't move to Hollywood to chase fame. He moved because it was warmer than the coal fields of Pennsylvania. The rest? That was just muscle and timing. Lee Marvin gets shot, keeps filming. He was tough before he ever hit a movie set. He fought in World War II as a Marine, saw combat in the Pacific, and was shot in the back during the Battle of Saipan. One bullet clipped his spine. Another nearly took his sciatic nerve. He spent over a year in recovery. They gave him a medical discharge. He was 21. Lee Marvin didn't talk about the war much. When people asked, he'd just say, "I got off easy," which tells you everything. In the 60s, he became the face of rough, violent men on screen. No-nonsense detectives. Vengeful loners. Hired guns with dead eyes. The voice was deep. The stare was colder. In 1967, he filmed Point Blank, a violent, gritty revenge story. The movie was shot mostly on location, real streets, real buildings, real bruises. During one take, a squib, the kind of small charge used to fake bullet hits, misfired and caught him in the ribs. It wasn't serious enough for the hospital, but it tore skin and caused a deep welt. He didn't stop. He finished the scene, stayed in character, and never asked for a second take. Later, when someone on set asked if he was okay, he looked down, wiped the blood off his shirt, and said, "I've had worse." Then he lit a cigarette. That wasn't rare for him. Marvin hated fakes. He did his own fight scenes, most of his stunts, and pushed to keep things realistic, even if it meant someone getting hurt. Off-screen, he wasn't exactly mellow. He drank hard, brawled in bars, and had a temper that made directors nervous. But he showed up on time, knew his lines, and didn't complain. That made him easy to hire, even if it meant a little chaos. He once said, "If I wasn't acting, I'd probably be in jail." Maybe. Or maybe he'd still be in uniform. Eastwood's freezing river stunt. By 1971, Clint Eastwood had already carved out his image. Quiet, calm, deadly. Dirty Harry would lock it in. The role wasn't just about holding a gun. It was about holding your nerve. And Eastwood had plenty. Late in the film, there's a chase that ends with Harry diving into a rock quarry pond. What most people didn't know: that water wasn't just cold, it was near freezing. Not special effects, not a set. Just runoff, rain-fed, and stagnant. Producers offered a stunt double. He refused. Said it wouldn't feel real. Said it wouldn't be real. They rolled cameras. He jumped. 8 times. No wetsuit, no padding, no heat lamps. He surfaced with his face tight and his breath short, but he never called cut. Between takes, crew members offered warm towels and hot drinks. He took the towel, gave it back, and went in again. People on set said the water smelled bad. He never said a word about it. He'd done worse before. On Rawhide, he was known for taking real falls off horses. On Hang 'Em High, he let himself be pulled by a noose just to get the shot right. When a rope burn left a scar, he shrugged it off. That's what separated him. Eastwood never made a scene about doing a stunt. He didn't joke around. He didn't act like a hero. He just did the thing no one else wanted to do and did it like it was normal. Years later, a crew member said Clint didn't even change his expression after the last take. Just walked out, dried off, and said, "All right, what's next?" That quarry scene helped turn Dirty Harry into a hit. People felt the weight of it, because it wasn't fake. The water was freezing, the fall was real, and the man doing it was exactly who he looked like. Eastwood didn't perform toughness. He showed up with it. Robert Mitchum's Chain Gang Days. He wasn't shocked when the cops came for him. It was 1948, and he'd just been caught at a party in LA with marijuana. At the time, that wasn't just a bad headline, it was a career-ending scandal. Studios freaked out. Reporters circled. Most actors would have denied everything. Mitchum didn't bother. He told the press, "Well, it was kind of dull in jail, but I met a lot of nice people." The court gave him a 2-month sentence at a California prison farm, complete with hard labor. He wasn't put in protective custody. No special treatment. He wore the uniform, did the work, and slept in the same barracks as everyone else. Chain gangs weren't a joke. Days started early. Inmates cleared brush, worked road crews, and hauled gear under the sun. Mitchum didn't complain. He actually posed for photos behind the fence, smirking. He told a reporter he was getting a tan and learning about real acting. When he got out, he went right back to work. Most stars would have tried to hide it. Mitchum didn't care. He treated the whole thing like a press junket. Studios expected his career to fall apart. Instead, ticket sales went up. Within months, he was back on screen in Rachel and the stranger opposite Loretta Young and William Holden. The scandal didn't touch the box office. If anything, it made him more appealing. People liked that he didn't flinch. He didn't fake an apology. He didn't play victim. He just owned it. Years later, Mitchum said, "The only difference between me and most actors is that I never learned to keep my mouth shut." He wasn't a method actor. He didn't rehearse much. But he had presence, attitude, and a voice that sounded like gravel in a coffee can. Directors said he was lazy, but always perfect on the first take. He never tried to be a role model. He smoked, drank, got in fights, and kept showing up to work. Jail didn't slow him down. If anything, it made him harder to ignore. Jack Palance lights himself on fire. He wasn't afraid of fire. In fact, he once lit his own arm on fire on national television just to prove a point. That wasn't a movie stunt. That was real life, on Ripley's Believe It or Not. In 1982, he was co-hosting the show, standing next to a table with a small flame-retardant cream display. The idea was simple. Apply the cream, light the sleeve, and show it wouldn't burn. The producers wanted a technician to do it. Palance said, "No, I've got it." The sleeve went up in flames, not a little puff, actual fire. The studio audience gasped. The crew panicked. Palance didn't move. He kept talking as the flames danced on his arm. When it burned out, he casually brushed off the ashes and cracked a smile. He didn't even flinch. That wasn't unusual for him. Palance had a long history of doing things his way. During World War II, he was a bomber pilot trainee. A fiery crash during training left his face severely burned. He went through multiple surgeries and came out looking harder than before. When he got to Hollywood, directors didn't cast him as a pretty boy. He played killers, brawlers, and guys who looked like they could break bones just by glaring. He often insisted on doing his own stunts, even in his 60s. He trained as a boxer, sparred regularly, and once did one-arm push-ups on live TV at age 73. Not once. Several. At the Oscars. People said he was difficult. He didn't care. If he thought a script was weak, he'd say so. If he didn't like a co-star, he'd let them know. But when the cameras rolled, he was all business. The fire stunt became a legend, not just because he did it, but because he did it without warning. No special effects, no prep crew, just a man who knew what pain felt like and didn't fear it. He didn't act fearless. He actually was. Mickey Rourke breaks his face. In the early 90s, Mickey Rourke was tired of acting. He'd gone from critical darling to tabloid magnate. Instead of chasing roles, he made a left turn straight into a boxing ring. Not celebrity boxing, actual professional fights. He trained like a real fighter. 6 days a week. Ran, sparred, took hits. His trainer, Freddie Roach, said Rourke could have gone far if he'd started 10 years earlier. But Mickey wasn't in it for titles. He said he missed the violence. He wanted to feel something again. Between 1991 and 1994, he fought 8 matches. Undefeated, with 6 wins and 2 draws. But the cost was brutal. He broke his nose, twice, shattered his cheekbone, cracked ribs, damaged his tongue. Doctors warned he might lose movement in his face. He kept going anyway. By 1992, his face was unrecognizable. Bones had shifted. His skin looked swollen. He underwent multiple surgeries just to breathe and chew properly. One operation went wrong and made things worse. Hollywood didn't know what to do with him. The handsome, smirking heartthrob from 9.5 weeks had been replaced by a thick-jawed, scarred version of himself. Casting offers stopped. Directors backed off. But he didn't seem to care. He was living in a small apartment, hanging with his dogs, training, and staying out of the spotlight. When asked if he regretted it, he said, "I'd rather be punched in the face than kiss someone's ass in Hollywood." Years later, he slowly returned. The Wrestler in 2008 brought him back. He played a washed-up fighter with a broken body because that's who he was. Rourke didn't fake toughness. He didn't need to. He lived through broken bones, bad press, ruined looks, and still came back swinging. Most actors avoid pain. Rourke chased it. Danny Trejo breaks up riot. His face tells a story. But his past? That's another level. Before he ever stepped in front of a camera, he did time in San Quentin. Armed robbery, drug charges, solitary confinement, the real stuff. By the time he got out, he wasn't just clean. He was dangerous in a different way, calm, controlled, and respected. In the early 90s, Trejo was working on a low-budget movie in East LA. The set had hired local gang members as extras. It was supposed to be a street scene. But tension built fast. 2 rival sets recognized each other. Trash talk turned to threats. People started reaching for weapons. The director froze. Security backed off. But Trejo stepped in. He walked right into the middle of the crowd and didn't raise his voice. He just said, "Not here, not now. This is my set." They stopped. Not because he was yelling, but because they knew who he was. He wasn't a celebrity. He was one of them. A guy who'd done time, earned respect, and walked the walk. Within minutes, the tension broke. The scene got filmed. No blood. No cops. Just Trejo. It wasn't the first time he stepped in like that. On other sets, he helped young actors stay clean. Talked to extras struggling with addiction. Producers didn't hire him for PR. They hired him because he could handle chaos. He started acting by accident. He was helping a friend stay sober and ended up on a movie set. A casting agent saw him and said, "You look like a convict." He smiled and said, "I am." Trejo's roles have ranged from action villains to taco commercials, but his real life beats any script. He's been stabbed, shot at, and locked up. Now he runs recovery centers and youth outreach programs when he's not filming. He once said, "Everything good that's happened to me is from helping someone else." That day on set, he didn't throw a punch. He didn't yell. He just stood there, steady, and that was enough. Tom Cruise hangs off plane. He doesn't fake stunts. If there's a way to do it for real, he'll do it. And in Mission Impossible Rogue Nation, he proved it again by hanging off the side of a military transport plane. For real. No green screen. No tricks. It was an Airbus A400M, a four-engine military aircraft designed to haul tanks. Cruz was strapped to the door by a thin harness, wearing a gray suit and wind goggles. The plane accelerated down the runway and took off, with Cruz clinging to the outside at 5,000 feet. They filmed it 8 times. Each take lasted several minutes. He was hit by wind, debris, and freezing air. A bird strike was a real concern. So was temporary blindness from wind exposure. Cruz had to keep his eyes open during the shot. He trained for weeks just to withstand the pressure. The studio was nervous. Insurance agents were horrified. The crew kept asking if he was sure. He kept saying yes. They even had a backup plan, film the shot with a stuntman and swap his face in post. Cruz refused. He said the audience would know. And that was the point. He's done this before. In Ghost Protocol, he scaled the Burj Khalifa. In Fallout, he did a halo jump from 25,000 feet. He also broke his ankle mid-jump, finished the take, and didn't stop filming. For Cruz, it's not about proving something, it's about control. He once said, "If I'm going to die, I want it to be on my terms." A little intense, but it explains a lot. The airplane stunt made headlines. Behind-the-scenes footage showed how dangerous it really was. One wrong move, one gear failure, and it was over. But Cruz didn't flinch. He hit his mark, gave the signal, and trusted the pilot. Most actors talk about pushing limits. Cruz just does it, then goes home, rewatches the footage, and plans something bigger. Keanu's spine surgery, no pain meds. In 1997, Keanu Reeves was getting ready to film The Matrix. He had one problem: his spine was falling apart. Doctors found that 2 of his spinal discs were severely compressed. One had started to calcify. His legs were going numb. He needed surgery fast. He went under the knife just weeks before stunt training began. It was a delicate operation. One bad move could have paralyzed him. But Reeves didn't delay production. He showed up to Kung Fu rehearsal wearing a neck brace. He could barely kick. So for the first few months, the stunt team focused only on arm moves and upper body forms. He pushed through it, no painkillers. He wanted to stay mentally sharp and didn't want meds clouding his head during choreography. That kind of training was brutal. Most actors would have taken 6 months off. Keanu didn't. He showed up every day, quiet and focused, learning complex martial arts scenes while hiding nerve damage. The crew didn't even know he was recovering from surgery. One of the stunt coordinators later said, "We just thought he was a little stiff." He didn't talk about the pain. He didn't use it as an excuse. When it came time to film, he nailed it. The backflips, the wire work, the slow-motion kicks. You'd never guess he was healing from spinal surgery the whole time. And that wasn't the only time he powered through something ugly. Keanu has filmed through broken ribs, busted ankles, and injuries from motorcycle crashes. He just doesn't broadcast it. He once said, "Pain is just part of life. You can't let it stop you." He's known for being calm, generous, and a little mysterious. But under all that is a guy who works harder than anyone, complains less than anyone, and shrugs off pain like it's no big deal. For The Matrix, he wasn't just pretending to be superhuman. He was already halfway there. Jason Statham's truck rescue dive. He was supposed to drive a stunt truck, fire a prop gun, and stop just short of a dock. Easy scene, done it 100 times. But on The Expendables 3, something went wrong. The brakes failed. Instead of stopping, the truck shot off the edge and plunged straight into the Black Sea. Everyone on set froze. The truck sank fast. No stunt double, no safety crew inside. Just Statham. Most people panic underwater. He didn't. He kicked out the driver's side window and swam to the surface. No air tank, no wetsuit, just raw instincts and years of diving experience. Before acting, Statham was a competitive diver for Britain's national team. For 12 years, he trained full-time, performing high dives and complex flips. That background probably saved his life. Crew members thought he'd be shaken. He wasn't. He swam back to shore, shook off the water, and asked when they were filming the next shot. Sylvester Stallone later said, "We'd all be dead. But not Jason. He's the real deal." He wasn't trying to be a hero. He just acted fast. And afterward, he didn't brag. He didn't ask for the footage to go viral. He just wanted the scene redone, this time with working breaks. That kind of mindset is what makes him different. Statham doesn't use stunt doubles. In The Transporter, he trained in Krav Maga, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and even did his own driving. In Crank, he hung off a helicopter 3,000 feet up. No rigging, just straps and confidence. He once said, "If I'm not doing my own stunts, I'm not doing my job." What happened in the Black Sea wasn't part of the script. It wasn't a movie moment. It was real. Cold water, a sinking truck, no backup plan, and Statham handled it like it was just another Tuesday.
In the summer of 1977, the world was abuzz with the release of The Spy Who Loved Me, a James Bond film that introduced a new kind of femme fatale. Amidst the glitz of the premiere, one woman stole the spotlight, not just as a Bond girl, but as a figure shrouded in allure and mystery. She was Barbara Bach, known for her captivating beauty and enigmatic presence. But behind this dazzling facade, there lay hidden chapters and untold stories that defied the typical Hollywood narrative. On the surface, Bach was the epitome of a 70s screen siren, but her journey to this pinnacle was laced with unexpected twists and turns. From her early days in Queens, New York, to the heights of Hollywood fame, her path was anything but ordinary. Rumors and whispers followed her, painting a picture of a life filled with more intrigue and complexity than any of her on-screen roles. As she stood there, basking in the adulation of fans and photographers, few could have guessed the depth of the secrets she harbored. Her marriage to a rock legend, Ringo Starr, added to her mystique, making her a fixture in both the cinematic and music worlds. But what was the story behind this glamorous union? What truths lay behind the tabloid headlines and the flashing cameras? From Queens to Queen of the Screen, Barbara Bach's story begins far from the glitz of Hollywood in the diverse borough of Queens, New York. Born Barbara Goldbach on August 27, 1947, to a policeman father and a homemaker mother, her early life was a far cry from the glamour she would later embody. Growing up in a modest middle-class family, Barbara's childhood was typical of the post-war American experience, marked by a mix of simplicity and the burgeoning dreams of a new generation. From an early age, Barbara showed an inclination towards the arts. Her striking features and natural grace made her stand out, even as a young girl. However, it wasn't just her physical beauty that set her apart. She possessed a quiet determination and a sense of ambition that was rare for women of her time. Barbara attended a local Catholic high school, where she first began to explore the possibility of a career in modeling. It was a decision that would set her on a path to stardom, though not without its challenges. After high school, Barbara's journey into the world of modeling began in earnest. She quickly made a name for herself, gracing the pages of catalogs and magazines. Her unique look, a blend of classic Hollywood glamour and a modern, relatable appeal, caught the eye of many in the industry. By the age of 16, she had already appeared in major publications, a remarkable feat for someone with no formal training or connections in the fashion world. Barbara's transition from modeling to acting was almost serendipitous. Her natural poise in front of the camera and her ability to convey emotion without words caught the attention of film producers. In the early 1970s, she made her foray into the world of cinema, a move that would forever change the trajectory of her life. Her early roles were small, yet significant, allowing her to hone her craft and learn the intricacies of acting. It was during this period that Barbara underwent a transformation, not just professionally, but personally. She married Italian businessman Count Augusto Gregorini in 1968, a union that brought her 2 children and a life that straddled both Europe and America. This marriage, though not lasting, was a crucial chapter in her life, providing her with experiences and perspectives that would shape her both as a person and as an actress. As Barbara's career progressed, her roles became more prominent, setting the stage for her breakthrough as a Bond girl. But her journey from the streets of Queens to the heart of Hollywood was more than just a tale of fame and success. It was a story of resilience, of a young woman navigating the complexities of an industry known for its fickleness and challenges. Barbara Bach's rise to fame was a testament to her talent, determination, and the unwavering belief in her own potential, qualities that would define her career and her life in the years to come. Bond girl breakthrough, more than meets the eye. The year 1977 marked a pivotal moment in Barbara Bach's career with her role as Anya Amasova in the James Bond film The Spy Who Loved Me. This role catapulted her into international stardom, but it also showcased her ability to bring depth and strength to a character that could have easily been just another decorative Bond girl. Anya Amasova, also known as Agent XXXX, was not your typical Bond girl. She was a skilled Soviet agent, equal in wit and prowess to James Bond himself. Barbara's portrayal of Anya broke new ground in the Bond franchise. She brought a blend of toughness, intelligence, and sensuality to the role, challenging the traditional perceptions of women in the Bond universe. Her performance was a significant departure from the more decorative roles often assigned to women in previous Bond films, making Anya Amasova a memorable and progressive character for the time. Barbara's preparation for the role was intense. She trained rigorously to perform many of her own stunts, adding authenticity to her character's physicality. Her dedication to the role was evident in the final product, as she seamlessly blended action and allure, creating a Bond girl who was more than just a foil or love interest for the protagonist. The Spy Who Loved Me was a major success, both critically and commercially, and Barbara's performance was a standout. The film's iconic scenes, including the underwater sequences and the memorable car chase, were made all the more captivating by her presence. Her chemistry with Roger Moore, who played James Bond, was palpable, adding a layer of complexity to their on-screen relationship. However, the impact of this role on Barbara's career was double-edged. While it brought her immense fame, it also typecast her in the eyes of many. Finding roles that matched the depth and significance of Anya Amasova proved challenging. The industry's inclination to pigeonhole her into similar roles was a hurdle she had to continually navigate. Despite these challenges, Barbara's role in The Spy Who Loved Me remains a significant part of her legacy. It redefined the Bond girl archetype and paved the way for more nuanced and empowered female characters in the franchise. Barbara Bach's portrayal of Anya Amasova was not just a breakthrough in her career, it was a breakthrough in the portrayal of women in action cinema, a role that resonated with audiences and critics alike and remains a defining moment in her career. Love in the Limelight, the Ringo Starr connection. Barbara Bach's life took a romantic turn when she met Ringo Starr, the legendary drummer of the Beatles, during the filming of the movie Caveman in 1980. This encounter sparked a love story that captured the public's imagination and has endured for decades, becoming one of the entertainment industry's most enduring relationships. Their connection was instant and profound, despite coming from vastly different backgrounds. Ringo, a world-famous musician from Liverpool, and Barbara, a rising Hollywood star with a modeling background, they found common ground in their shared experiences in the limelight and the pressures that came with fame. Their romance blossomed amidst the backdrop of the film's production, a prehistoric comedy that saw them both stepping out of their comfort zones. The public was fascinated by this pairing. Ringo Starr, already a household name as part of the world's most famous band, and Barbara Bach, the glamorous Bond girl, made for a compelling duo. Their relationship was followed closely by the media, which often portrayed them as a quintessential celebrity couple, living a life of luxury and excess. However, the reality of their relationship was far more complex and grounded. Barbara and Ringo's bond was tested and strengthened by their individual and shared struggles. Both had faced the challenges of fame and the personal issues that often accompany a life in the public eye. They supported each other through these trials, including Ringo's well-documented battle with alcoholism. Barbara played a significant role in his recovery, and together they embarked on a journey of sobriety that further solidified their relationship. Their marriage in 1981 was a testament to their deep connection. It was not just a union of two celebrities, but a partnership based on mutual respect, understanding, and love. They navigated the ups and downs of life together, maintaining a strong bond that has lasted for over 4 decades. Barbara's relationship with Ringo Starr added a new dimension to her public persona. She became known not just for her work in film and modeling, but also as part of a celebrity couple that has stood the test of time. Their relationship has been a source of fascination and admiration, a rare Hollywood love story that has endured far beyond the usual lifespan of celebrity romances. The story of Barbara Bach and Ringo Starr is more than just a tale of celebrity romance. It is a narrative of resilience, support, and enduring love, a reminder that even in the unpredictable world of fame, genuine connections and lasting relationships are possible. Their journey together continues to captivate and inspire, a testament to the power of love in the face of the ever-changing tides of fame and fortune. The mystery of the missing screen Siren. After her rise to fame and her high-profile marriage, Barbara Bach's presence in the Hollywood scene began to wane, leading many to wonder about the sudden retreat of this once ubiquitous screen siren. Her gradual disappearance from the public eye in the late 1980s and 1990s was a source of curiosity and speculation. Following her success in The Spy Who Loved Me and a string of other films, Barbara's acting career slowed down. This shift was not due to a lack of talent or opportunities, but rather a conscious choice. She began to prioritize her personal life over her career, focusing on her family and her marriage to Ringo Starr. This decision was a stark contrast to the typical Hollywood narrative, where careers often take precedence over personal life. Barbara's retreat from the limelight was also influenced by her desire for a more normal life, away from the constant scrutiny and pressure of fame. She and Ringo sought a quieter existence, one that allowed them to focus on their relationship and personal growth. This period saw Barbara stepping away from acting and public appearances, choosing instead to live a life away from the cameras. The lack of public information and her absence from the entertainment industry fueled rumors and speculation. Some speculated about possible career troubles or personal issues, while others wondered if she had left the industry for good. However, the truth was far less sensational. Barbara was simply taking a step back to focus on what mattered most to her, her family and personal well-being. During this time, Barbara also explored other interests and passions. She became involved in various charitable endeavors, particularly those related to addiction recovery and mental health, drawing on her and Ringo's experiences. This work, though less publicized, was a significant part of her life during this period. The mystery of Barbara Bach's retreat from Hollywood is not a tale of downfall or disappearance, but a story of choice and prioritization. It reflects a decision to value personal fulfillment over public acclaim, a choice that is both rare and commendable in the celebrity world. Barbara's life during this period may have been less visible to the public, but it was no less meaningful or impactful, marked by personal growth, family, and a commitment to causes close to her heart. Rumors and realities. The untold stories. Barbara Bach's withdrawal from the public eye led to a proliferation of rumors and conjecture about her life and career. In the absence of concrete information, the media and public often filled the gaps with speculation, some of which strayed far from the truth. One persistent rumor was that Barbara's marriage to Ringo Starr was in trouble, a speculation fueled by the couple's retreat from the public eye. However, contrary to these rumors, their relationship remained strong and supportive. Their decision to step back from the limelight was a mutual one, aimed at focusing on their personal lives and health, particularly in the wake of Ringo's struggles with addiction. Another area of speculation centered around Barbara's career. Some suggested that she had been unable to find work after her stint as a Bond girl, a claim that overlooks the reality of her deliberate choice to reduce her acting commitments. Barbara had opportunities to continue her career in film, but chose to prioritize other aspects of her life. There were also rumors about Barbara's health, with some speculating that she had stepped away from the public eye due to illness. These rumors were unfounded and did not reflect the reality of her situation. Barbara was, in fact, focusing on her well-being in a broader sense, including her mental and emotional health, which was a far cry from the health scares rumored in the press. The speculation about Barbara's life during this period highlights the challenges faced by public figures when they choose to live a more private life. The lack of information can lead to a narrative controlled by rumor and speculation rather than facts. For Barbara, this meant dealing with untrue stories and misconceptions about her life and choices. However, despite these challenges, Barbara remained steadfast in her decision to live life on her terms. She and Ringo maintained a strong, supportive relationship, far from the troubled marriage depicted in the tabloids. Her career choices were made with a clear understanding of her priorities and values, not out of necessity or lack of opportunity. She navigated the complexities of fame and public perception with grace, making choices that were right for her, regardless of public opinion or speculation. Her story during these years is one of resilience and self-determination, a narrative that goes beyond the rumors and reveals the reality of a life lived with intention and purpose. A Quiet Crusade, Bach's unseen advocacy. While Barbara Bach's retreat from the Hollywood spotlight led to various speculations, it also marked a period where she dedicated herself to quieter yet impactful advocacy work. Away from the glare of the cameras, Barbara engaged in philanthropic efforts, particularly focusing on issues close to her heart, such as addiction recovery and mental health. Barbara's personal experiences, especially witnessing Ringo Starr's battle with alcoholism and their joint journey towards sobriety, deeply influenced her advocacy work. She understood the challenges and stigmas associated with addiction and mental health issues, which fueled her commitment to helping others facing similar struggles. One of the key areas of her advocacy was supporting organizations and initiatives that provided help and resources for those battling addiction. She often worked behind the scenes, lending her support in ways that didn't seek public acknowledgement or fame. This approach was reflective of her desire to make a genuine difference rather than garner publicity. Barbara also became involved in mental health initiatives, recognizing the interconnection between mental well-being and addiction recovery. Her work in this field was marked by a compassionate understanding of the complexities of mental health issues, and she advocated for greater awareness and support for those affected. Her philanthropic efforts extended beyond addiction and mental health. Barbara supported various charitable causes, contributing her time and resources to make a positive impact. This aspect of her life, though less known to the public, was a significant part of her identity during this period. Barbara Bach's advocacy work is a crucial part of her story, showcasing a different side of the former actress and model. It reveals her depth, compassion, and commitment to making a difference in the lives of others. Her quiet crusade in the realms of addiction recovery and mental health, along with her broader philanthropic efforts, highlight her as a figure of substance and empathy, qualities that often remained overshadowed by her celebrity status. The Legacy of a Bond Girl, revisiting Barbara Bach. Barbara Bach's legacy in the entertainment industry is inextricably linked to her iconic role as Anya Amasova in The Spy Who Loved Me. While her career encompassed more than this single role, it is this portrayal that has left an indelible mark on Hollywood and the James Bond franchise. Anya Amasova, or Agent XXX, was a groundbreaking character for the Bond series. Barbara's portrayal brought a new dimension to the typical Bond girl. She was not just a love interest or a damsel in distress, but a competent, strong, and independent agent in her own right. This role challenged the traditional narrative and paved the way for more complex and empowered female characters in future Bond films. Barbara's performance as Anya Amasova was both celebrated and critiqued at the time. While some praised her for bringing depth and strength to the character, others were critical of the Bond girl archetype itself, viewing it as a symbol of the objectification of women in cinema. However, Barbara's portrayal stood out for its balance of intelligence, physical prowess, and sensuality, making Anya a memorable and respected character in the Bond universe. Over the years, the perception of Barbara's role in The Spy Who Loved Me has evolved. Today, it is often viewed as a progressive step for its time, with Barbara Bach being credited for infusing the character with a sense of agency and competence rarely seen in previous Bond girls. Beyond her role in the Bond film, Barbara's legacy in Hollywood includes her other film roles and her modeling career. She was part of a generation of actresses who navigated the changing landscape of Hollywood in the 1970s and 1980s, a time when the industry was grappling with evolving narratives around women and their portrayal on screen. In retrospect, Barbara Bach's impact on the film industry extends beyond her on-screen appearances. Her decision to step away from the limelight and focus on her personal life and advocacy work speaks to a broader narrative about the choices and challenges faced by women in Hollywood. It highlights the often difficult balance between professional success and personal fulfillment. Where is Barbara now? Unveiling the present. The question of where is Barbara Bach now resonates with those who remember her as the glamorous Bond girl and the actress who graced the silver screen with her presence. In recent years, Barbara has maintained a low profile, leading many to wonder about her current life and activities. Today, Barbara Bach is far from the Hollywood spotlight, living a life that prioritizes personal fulfillment over public visibility. She continues to share her life with Ringo Starr, with their marriage being one of the longest-lasting unions in the entertainment industry. Their relationship, which began amidst the glitz of Hollywood, has evolved into a deep and enduring partnership. Barbara's current life is characterized by a focus on family, personal well-being, and continued involvement in philanthropic causes. She remains dedicated to her advocacy work, particularly in the areas of addiction, recovery, and mental health, drawing on her and Ringo's personal experiences to contribute positively to these causes. While she has stepped away from acting, Barbara's influence and legacy in the film industry remains significant. Her portrayal of Anya Amasova in The Spy Who Loved Me continues to be celebrated as a pivotal moment in the evolution of female characters in the James Bond series and in Hollywood at large. Barbara's decision to lead a more private life has not diminished the public's fascination with her. She occasionally makes appearances at events, often related to her philanthropic work or supporting Ringo in his musical endeavors. These rare public appearances are a reminder of her enduring presence and the interest she still commands. In many ways, Barbara Bach's current life is a testament to her ability to navigate the complexities of fame and personal choice. She has successfully balanced her public persona with a private life that is rich in personal relationships and meaningful work. Her journey from a celebrated actress to a dedicated advocate and private individual offers a unique narrative about the choices and paths available to those in the public eye.
Some Hollywood stars weren't just heavy drinkers, they were so drunk they had to be carried onto set. Others slurred their lines, forgot entire movies they starred in, or even died with a drink in their hand. This is the dark side of fame, the actors who were completely wasted at all times. John Barrymore. He wasn't just a star, he was Hollywood's first great alcoholic. Long before rehab was an option, he drank himself into a joke. Studios covered for him at first, but by the end, even they couldn't save him. In the 1920s, Barrymore was on top of the world. He had the looks, the voice, and the talent. But off-camera, he was rarely sober. His drinking got so bad that directors had to feed him lines off-camera because he couldn't remember them. Some days, he couldn't even stand up straight and had to be held up by crew members just to finish a scene. Everyone in Hollywood knew he had a problem. He showed up drunk, stayed drunk, and somehow still got roles, at first. But things fell apart quickly. One night during a live performance, he completely blanked out. Instead of trying to recover, he turned to the audience and slurred, "Line, please?" The show was shut down early, and from then on, everyone knew Barrymore wasn't the same actor anymore. By the 1930s, his drinking wrecked his career. Studios didn't want to risk hiring him, and directors stopped covering for him. Even when friends tried to help, he kept drinking. His body started shutting down, shaking hands, failing memory, and a career in free fall. It wasn't just his career that crumbled. His personal life was a mess. He burned through marriages, lost his fortune, and ruined friendships. He was once considered one of the greatest actors of his time, but by the end he was a cautionary tale. The final years? A disaster. He was broke, sick, and barely able to work. Friends had to help pay his bills, but nothing could stop him from drinking himself to death. And if you think Hollywood let him rest in peace, think again. His so-called friends stole his corpse as a prank, dragging his lifeless body around for one last drunken joke. Barrymore was the blueprint for Hollywood self-destruction. He was the first major star to drink himself into oblivion, but he wouldn't be the last. W.C. Fields. While most stars tried to hide their drinking, Fields didn't even bother. He carried a thermos full of gin everywhere, labeled with innocent words like pineapple juice or orange soda. Everyone knew what was inside, but no one dared to stop him. By the time he made it big in Hollywood, Fields was already a heavy drinker. He had spent years in vaudeville, performing night after night while nursing a constant buzz. Drinking was part of his personality, both on and off screen. He played lovable drunks in films, but behind the scenes he was far from charming when the alcohol took over. His drinking got so bad that directors had to shoot around his hangovers. Mornings were a lost cause. He was either too sick or still drunk. By afternoon, he'd start sipping from his juice thermos just to get through filming. Some days he was so hammered that he slurred entire scenes, forcing multiple retakes. Other times he skipped set entirely, leaving studios scrambling to explain his absence. Fields had a sharp wit, but when he drank, his temper flared. He'd curse out producers, insult his co-stars, and storm off set if something didn't go his way. His drinking wore down his body over time. His once sharp comedic timing started slipping, and so did his health. By the 1940s, his body was failing him. His liver was shot, and doctors warned him that if he didn't quit drinking, he wouldn't last much longer. But Fields didn't care. Instead of quitting, he had a liquor stash built into his hospital room. Nurses would find hidden bottles of whiskey under his mattress, and he'd sneak drinks when no one was looking. He drank until his final breath. When Fields died in 1946, people weren't surprised. His liver had given up long before he did. His career was legendary, but so was his drinking. And unlike other stars, he never tried to pretend otherwise. W.C. Fields wasn't just drunk all the time, he made sure everyone knew it. Errol Flynn. He was the ultimate movie hero, dashing, fearless, and always up for an adventure. But off-screen, he was a reckless alcoholic who drank so much that even Hollywood couldn't keep up with him. If there was a bottle around, Flynn was already ahead of the game. Flynn's drinking wasn't just a bad habit, it was his lifestyle. He'd start his day with champagne, switch to hard liquor by lunch, and keep going until he passed out. Studios tried to hide it, but his drinking made productions a nightmare. He slurred his lines, stumbled through action scenes, and sometimes needed to be propped up just to finish filming. During The Adventures of Robin Hood, 1938, he was so drunk during fight scenes that stunt doubles had to take over more than usual. In They Died with Their Boots On, 1941, he kept falling off his horse because he couldn't stay balanced. Directors grew frustrated, but Flynn's star power kept him employed, at least for a while. His drinking wasn't just for fun. Flynn was self-medicating, drowning out personal demons with endless bottles of rum and whiskey. He was constantly in legal trouble, facing accusations of assault and scandalous affairs. His court cases became just as famous as his movies, but instead of slowing down, he drank even harder. By the 1950s, Hollywood had enough. Studios stopped covering for him, and his reputation crashed. His once chiseled looks were puffed and bloated from years of heavy drinking. His liver was failing, but he didn't stop. He couldn't. In 1959, Flynn's body finally gave up. At just 50 years old, he died of a massive heart attack, but doctors found his organs were destroyed from years of alcohol abuse. His liver was so damaged that they said it looked like he belonged to an 80-year-old man. Flynn was Hollywood's original bad boy, but his addiction was his downfall. He lived fast, drank hard, and never made it to old age. If Hollywood was a party, Flynn drank until the lights went out. Richard Burton. He was a functioning alcoholic who drank his way through nearly every movie he made. Unlike others who tried to hide it, Burton showed up wasted on set and still delivered Oscar-worthy performances. But behind the scenes, his addiction controlled everything. Burton's drinking started early. By his 20s, he was already downing multiple bottles of liquor a day. Success only made it worse. He became one of Hollywood's highest-paid actors, but with that fame came an endless supply of booze. During Cleopatra, 1963, where he met Elizabeth Taylor, he was drunk in nearly every scene. The two fueled each other's addictions, turning their romance into a storm of booze, fights, and makeups. His drinking was legendary. He once chugged 3 bottles of vodka before noon, then went straight to filming like nothing happened. Some directors learned to work around it, shooting scenes early in the day before he got too drunk. Others just gave up, letting Burton slur his way through takes. By the 1970s, his addiction took its toll. His once powerful voice turned hoarse, his sharp looks faded, and his body started breaking down. He tried quitting. Doctors warned him he was drinking himself to death, but every attempt ended the same way. Back at the bar. Burton died in 1984 at just 58 years old. His liver was completely shot, and his body was wrecked from decades of drinking. He left behind a legacy of brilliant performances, but also a reputation as one of Hollywood's most tragic drunks. Unlike others who drank themselves out of a career, Burton somehow kept going, but his addiction won in the end. Peter O'Toole. He was a Hollywood legend, but he was also rarely sober. He built a career on charm, wit, and raw talent, while drinking so much that he sometimes couldn't remember filming entire movies. O'Toole's drinking started early. By the time he became famous in Lawrence of Arabia, 1962, he was already drinking more than his body could handle. He was known to down multiple bottles of whiskey in a single night, then show up to set the next morning like nothing happened, until it started affecting his work. His reputation as a drunken genius followed him everywhere. He would slur through scenes, forget his lines, or suddenly fall asleep in the middle of filming. On Goodbye, Mr. Chips, 1969, production shut down multiple times because he was too wasted to work. In interviews, he later admitted, "I have no memory of making some films." His drinking wasn't just a problem for Hollywood. It nearly killed him. In the 1970s, doctors found that years of alcohol abuse had destroyed his stomach lining, leading to internal bleeding and emergency surgery. They told him if he didn't stop drinking, he wouldn't survive. O'Toole tried to quit but never fully gave it up. He continued acting, but his wild behavior and heavy drinking kept him from reaching his full potential. Even later in life, when he claimed to be sober, people doubted it. His reputation was too legendary. He lived longer than most Hollywood drunks, making it to 81, but his body was wrecked from decades of drinking. When he died in 2013, fans remembered him as a brilliant actor, but also one of Hollywood's most infamous alcoholics. Peter O'Toole didn't just drink, he turned it into an art form. Oliver Reed. His reputation for out-drinking entire bars made him a legend, but it also destroyed his career and eventually his life. Reed's drinking was on another level. He didn't just sip whiskey between takes, he chugged entire bottles. He once challenged 5 Royal Navy sailors to a drinking contest and won, downing over 100 pints of beer in a single session. By the end, he had to be carried out unconscious. On set, he was a nightmare and a spectacle. Directors never knew if they were getting a world-class actor or a slurring disaster. During The Three Musketeers, 1973, he showed up so drunk that he could barely stand. He got through the scenes, but barely. By the 1980s, his drinking had wrecked his reputation. Studios didn't want the risk, and his career spiraled downward. But the real tragedy came during Gladiator, 2000. Reed had been given one last shot at a big role playing Proximo, but instead of staying focused, he went on one final drinking spree. While filming in Malta, he downed 8 pints of beer, 12 shots of rum, half a bottle of whiskey, and a few doubles of cognac, all in one sitting. That night, he collapsed and died of a massive heart attack. His death was so sudden that the film had to use CGI to finish his scenes. Reed had drunk himself to his own tragic ending. Oliver Reed's drinking wasn't just a problem, it was his identity. He outlived many of Hollywood's legendary drunks, but in the end, alcohol still won. Mickey Rourke. He had everything: looks, talent, and a rising career. But instead of building on it, he drank, fought, and burned every bridge in Hollywood. His downfall wasn't just alcohol, but it played a massive role in his destruction. In the 1980s, Rourke was unstoppable. Movies like 9.5 Weeks and Angel Heart made him one of Hollywood's most in-demand actors. But behind the scenes, he was drinking heavily, getting into bar fights, and making himself unhireable. Directors hated working with him because he was either too drunk to perform or too aggressive to control. His drinking wasn't just a problem on set, it ruined his personal life. He trashed relationships, got arrested multiple times, and became known as Hollywood's biggest liability. Instead of cleaning up, he walked away from acting and became a professional boxer, a move that only made things worse. Boxing destroyed his face, but he still drank through the pain. By the late 90s, he was broke, washed up, and completely forgotten by Hollywood. Even he admitted, "I was drinking myself to death." He lost roles, lost friends, and almost lost his life. But somehow, Rourke pulled off a comeback. He got sober, repaired some of the damage, and landed The Wrestler, 2008. A film that mirrored his own self-destructive past. It earned him an Oscar nomination, but even with success, he struggled to stay clean. Mickey Rourke should have been one of Hollywood's greatest legends. Instead, alcohol and bad choices turned him into a cautionary tale. Even today, he's a reminder of how fast Hollywood can chew you up, if you let it. Dennis Hopper. He was Hollywood's ultimate wild card. For decades, he was either too drunk, too high, or too unhinged to function. Somehow, he still delivered legendary performances. even when he could barely stand upright. Hopper's drinking started early, but by the time he became famous in Easy Rider, 1969, it was out of control. He drank on set, between takes, and sometimes during filming. He was so wasted while directing the last movie, 1971, that the film became an incoherent disaster, and Hollywood blacklisted him for nearly a decade. During Apocalypse Now, 1979, Hopper was so drunk and coked out that he couldn't remember his lines. Director Francis Ford Coppola had to feed him one sentence at a time because giving him a full script was pointless. Somehow, his manic energy worked for the role, but off-screen, he was a walking train wreck. Hopper's reputation was legendary, but his career kept crashing and burning. He spent most of the 80s either too wasted to work or banned from Hollywood entirely. At his lowest, he lived in the desert, talking to himself and drinking until he hallucinated. He later admitted he was drinking 28 beers, a bottle of whiskey, and doing 3 grams of cocaine every day. Then, out of nowhere, he got sober. In 1986, he made an insane comeback with Blue Velvet, playing one of the most terrifying villains in film history. This time, the madness was acting, not alcohol. Dennis Hopper drank his way through decades of Hollywood, burning bridges and ruining opportunities. But unlike most stars on this list, he actually cleaned up and made it back. His career should have been over, but somehow he outlived his own chaos. Christopher Hitchens. He was Hollywood adjacent, a constant presence in interviews, debates, and film discussions, always with a drink in hand. Unlike most people on this list, he didn't try to hide it. In fact, he embraced his alcoholism and made it part of his public persona. Hitchens drank like it was his job. Mornings started with scotch or wine, and by afternoon he'd moved on to whiskey, vodka, or whatever was available. He once admitted that he was never fully sober past lunchtime. His friends, colleagues, and even his enemies knew that if you were meeting Hitchens, you were meeting Hitchens and his drink. Despite being constantly buzzed, he was brilliant. His ability to debate, write, and command attention never seemed to suffer, at least on the surface. He could drink glass after glass of whiskey, then go on live TV and verbally dismantle his opponents. His mind was razor sharp, even when his liver wasn't. But make no mistake, his drinking had consequences. Friends noticed his once strong voice becoming raspier, his famous wit sometimes losing its edge. He started to look tired, worn down. Years of chain smoking and drinking finally caught up to him. In 2010, he was diagnosed with esophageal cancer, the kind that heavy drinking and smoking practically guarantee. Doctors told him to quit, but he didn't see the point. He once joked that if he had his life to live over again, he would drink more, not less. Even as his body failed him, Hitchens kept writing, debating, and of course, drinking. He saw no reason to stop. It was who he was. In 2011, at 62 years old, he passed away, leaving behind a legacy of brilliant writing, sharp debates, and a lifetime of liquor-fueled intellect. Unlike Hollywood stars who drank themselves into oblivion, Hitchens never spiraled out of control, but his addiction still killed him. He was proof that even the smartest minds aren't invincible when alcohol is in the mix. Nicolas Cage. Unlike the other names on this list, he is still standing, but his reputation as Hollywood's modern-day wildcard has been fueled by years of alcohol, erratic behavior, and bizarre public meltdowns. If old-school stars drank their way into oblivion, Nicolas Cage has drunk his way into internet legend. Cage wasn't always Hollywood's unhinged meme king. In the 90s and early 2000s, he was an A-list actor with an Oscar, blockbuster hits, and critical respect. But behind the scenes, his drinking was getting out of control. Directors noticed his slurred speech, co-stars saw his erratic moods, and soon his performances started getting weirder and more unpredictable. Then, the public meltdowns started. In 2011, Cage was arrested in New Orleans for public drunkenness and disturbing the peace, after getting into a shouting match with his wife. Reports claimed he was stumbling, screaming, and too wasted to control himself. A few years later, he was caught drunkenly singing Prince's Purple Rain at a karaoke bar, so hammered that he could barely stand. The drinking wasn't just a personal issue. It wrecked his finances, too. Cage went on a spending spree fueled by booze and bad decisions, blowing through $150 million on castles, private islands, a dinosaur skull, and a pet octopus. When the IRS came knocking, he had to take every role he could get, leading to the infamous era of low-budget, straight-to-DVD Cage movies. Despite the chaos, Cage never fully collapsed like the drunks of old Hollywood. Somehow, he kept delivering performances, sometimes brilliant, sometimes downright unhinged. His 2018 film Mandy reminded people why he was a star in the first place, and in 2021, Pig earned him some of the best reviews of his career. Unlike Barrymore, Flynn, or Reed, Cage hasn't drunk himself into an early grave. Yet. But his booze-fueled antics, erratic career, and bizarre public breakdowns make him the closest thing modern Hollywood has to an old-school drunken disaster. Whether he crashes completely or somehow reinvents himself again, one thing is certain: Nicolas Cage is never boring. She won an Oscar with a comeback and spent the next 30 years proving her critics right. Joan Crawford's worst role? Herself. Oscar high, career confusion. She won an Academy Award in 1946 for Mildred Pierce, and for a minute, it looked like she'd pulled off the ultimate comeback. She had been dropped by MGM just a few years earlier, labeled box office poison in a 1938 ad alongside other stars past their prime. But when Mildred Pierce hit, she wasn't just back, she was dominant. That win inflated her already well-known sense of control. Crawford took her pick of roles and passed on some of the best scripts of the era. One of the biggest? All About Eve. The lead part eventually went to Bette Davis, who earned critical raves and an Oscar nomination. Crawford had called the script talky. Instead, she chose safer projects like Flamingo Road, Harriet Craig, and The Damn Don't Cry. They weren't flops, but they didn't elevate her. Audiences started seeing the same performance again and again. Dramatic tears, icy glares, and monologues about betrayal. One reviewer even said she looked like she was competing with herself. Behind the scenes, directors struggled to manage her. She demanded specific lighting, insisted on rehearsing scenes long past the scheduled wrap time, and sometimes took over costume design. Makeup artists were warned not to touch her brows. One former Warner Brothers producer said, "Working with Joan wasn't just directing, it was negotiating." Her need for image control was relentless. She reportedly kept a mirror off camera during shoots to check herself between takes, and she had final say over camera angles. If the cinematographer disagreed, she'd call the studio boss directly. Publicly, she still drew headlines and packed theaters. But the freshness of Mildred Pierce was gone by the end of the decade. In 1949, the New York Times reviewed Flamingo Road and remarked, "Miss Crawford seems to be playing Miss Crawford." She wasn't evolving, she was repeating. And while she thought she was at her peak, Hollywood was quietly preparing for her decline. Queen Bee or set tyrant? By the early 1950s, Joan was still booking leading roles, but now the drama off-screen was getting just as loud as anything in the script. She starred in Sudden Fear in 1952, earning another Academy Award nomination. The film did well. Critics praised her intensity. But the moment didn't last. Behind closed doors, directors said she was becoming almost impossible to work with. She questioned blocking, changed camera setups, and would stop entire scenes mid-take if she didn't like her co-star's line reading. Things reached a boiling point during the 1955 production of Queen Bee. It was supposed to be a sharp melodrama. Instead, it turned into a lesson in survival for everyone on set. Crawford reportedly dominated every department. If she didn't like a prop, it vanished. If a supporting actress stood out too much, Joan ordered the costume department to dull her wardrobe. She was notorious for arriving on set with her own cooler, filled with vodka and Coca-Cola labeled for medicinal use. The cast and crew called it the fifth assistant director. Actress Betsy Palmer, who played the young ingenue, later recalled Crawford mocking her makeup and wardrobe in front of the crew. "She could freeze you with a look," Palmer said. "And if you cried, she liked it." Cinematographers weren't safe either. She had favorite angles and would bark orders if the lighting didn't hit the cheekbone just right. One grip reportedly said, if the light was wrong, she didn't fix her position. She fixed you. Director Ranald McDougall, who also wrote the script, admitted she pushed for rewrites almost daily. He gave in more often than he wanted to. By the time filming wrapped, no one wanted a sequel. Crawford blamed her co-stars for the bad energy. Publicly, she smiled through press junkets and interviews. But inside the studio gates, the stories were circulating. Joan wasn't worth the chaos. Studio exit and public meltdowns. By the mid-1950s, the studio system that had built Joan Crawford's career was collapsing, and she wasn't adapting well. After Queen Bee, she signed with Columbia Pictures and made a few more films, Autumn Leaves and The Story of Esther Costello. Both were dramatic, emotional, and heavily marketed around her image. But younger stars like Audrey Hepburn and Kim Novak were taking center stage. Joan still demanded top billing. Audiences were starting to move on. Then came the real trouble. Warner Brothers let her go in 1959. After a long career with major contracts, she was now a free agent, with fewer offers and rising costs. Studios weren't interested in her rules anymore. One exec said, she could sell a movie, but the price was dealing with Joan Crawford. Around the same time, public appearances started backfiring. She showed up late to a charity event in Boston, slurring words and stumbling through her speech. The press brushed it off as illness. Privately, friends knew she was drinking more heavily. She started accepting television interviews to stay visible, but they weren't doing her any favors. On one talk show, she snapped at the host for calling her former screen queen. She was visibly agitated and corrected every question. The footage didn't go viral, this was the 50s, but word spread. She'd also gained a reputation for calling journalists after bad reviews to argue, sometimes late at night. Columnists quietly stopped taking her calls. By 1960, she was a walking contradiction. She still acted like she was at the center of Hollywood, but the calls weren't coming. She hadn't had a real hit in years. And behind the glam shots in photoplay, there was a woman holding tighter and tighter to a career that was slipping through her fingers. Pepsi power plays and boardroom battles. In 1955, Joan married Alfred Steele, the president of Pepsi Cola. He died just 4 years later, leaving her widowed, and with a new role, board member. It was supposed to be a graceful pivot. Instead, it turned into another battlefield. Joan jumped headfirst into the corporate world, attending shareholder meetings, launching publicity campaigns, and personally appearing at bottling plants. She called herself Pepsi's First Lady. Executives called her something else. Disruptive. She traveled across the country doing PR events in full movie star wardrobe. Local plant managers were confused. One Pepsi exec said she'd show up dressed like it was the Oscars to tour a syrup facility. Behind the scenes, tensions built. Joan demanded to approve advertisements and even vetoed slogans she didn't like. She once refused to appear at an event because the backdrop clashed with her outfit. Her name may have brought publicity, but it came with chaos. The board quietly moved to limit her power. In 1966, they forced her into early retirement. She was told during a board meeting, no warning, no dignity. She left the building in tears, reportedly muttering that they'd betrayed her. She told the press it was her decision. It wasn't. Years later, one board member said, she didn't know how to be anything but a star. That works in movies, not in business. Crawford never forgot the humiliation. She continued calling herself a Pepsi ambassador and kept attending events on her own dime, even after being pushed out. This wasn't just about soda. It was about identity. Acting offers were drying up, and the last organization that needed her just shut the door. She had money, but no real career left. She still gave interviews pretending she had scripts lined up, but insiders knew there weren't any. Family fallout and Christina's silence. By the late 1960s, the cracks in Joan Crawford's carefully crafted image weren't just professional, they were personal. And her adopted daughter Christina was at the center of it. From the outside, Joan played the role of the perfect Hollywood mother. Magazine spreads showed her decorating nurseries and posing with matching outfits. But the reality behind closed doors wasn't as polished. Joan had adopted 4 children, Christina, Christopher, and twins Kathy and Cindy. By the late 60s, she was only speaking to one of them. Christopher had been sent to a military academy, then cut off entirely. The twins were mostly out of the picture. Christina was still around, but just barely. Tension between mother and daughter was obvious during press interviews. In 1968, when Christina took a small TV role on The Secret Storm, Joan called the producers and insisted on taking over the role while her daughter recovered from an illness. She was 60, playing a 24-year-old. The audience laughed. Christina was humiliated. They stopped speaking soon after. Neighbors and staff started talking. One former housekeeper said Crawford ran the home like a barracks. Rules were strict, punishments were harsh, and affection came with conditions. Christina would later claim her mother's behavior bordered on abusive, allegations that at the time weren't public but were quietly spreading in Hollywood. In 1973, Christina was hospitalized for a ruptured ovarian tumor. Joan never visited. Friends asked why. She reportedly replied, "She made her bed." To outsiders, Crawford still appeared poised and generous. She donated to charities, gave red carpet interviews, and smiled for cameras. But behind the PR photos was a woman estranged from her children, isolated in her own home and clinging to an image that wasn't holding up anymore. The next year, she'd try to return to the screen one last time. It would not go well. Final films and career freefall. Crawford's final chapter as a working actress came in 1970, and it wasn't glamorous. She starred in Trog, a low-budget British horror movie about a prehistoric creature discovered in a cave. She played Dr. Brockton, a scientist who teaches the creature to speak and wear clothes. The costume looked like a cheap Halloween mask. The script was worse. Joan had taken the role out of desperation. Major studios weren't calling, and she needed money to maintain her lifestyle. She reportedly clashed with the director and asked for script rewrites. The production team said she drank heavily on set and kept forgetting lines. When Trog was released, critics didn't hold back. Variety called it a waste of film. Others said it looked like a parody. Joan later admitted she never saw the final cut. She told friends it was beneath her. She never made another movie after that. By now, even the fan magazines had backed off. She was no longer the subject of admiration. She was nostalgia. Young audiences didn't know her. Older ones didn't want to see her like this. In 1972, she was honored at a film retrospective. She arrived in a heavy gown and thick makeup, waving to a crowd of mostly older fans. One reporter called it a tribute wrapped in denial. She still called herself a working actress. She still told friends she had offers on the table. But no one was offering anything. Trog had done more than kill her career. It turned her into a punchline. The Queen of MGM was now remembered for a caveman movie. The photo that ended it all. By 1974, Joan Crawford wasn't taking many public appearances, but she made an exception for a charity event with Rosalind Russell. They'd both been stars in the same golden era. It seemed safe, until the photo came out. A black and white picture of Joan and Rosalind made the newspapers. It wasn't flattering. Her face was gaunt, her makeup heavy, and her eyes looked sunken. To most readers, it was just another red carpet shot. To Crawford, it was devastating. She called friends in a panic, said she looked grotesque. She reportedly cried for hours and demanded the photo be pulled from circulation. It wasn't. editors ignored her. That was the last time she appeared in public. She canceled all future appearances, turned down interviews, refused to pose for photographers. According to close friends, she stopped looking in mirrors altogether. Her publicist later said she was terrified of being seen as old. And just like that, she vanished. There were no more red carpets, no fan meet and greets, no cameo offers. Her housekeeper reported that Crawford started wearing large sunglasses indoors and only allowed visitors in dim lighting. She turned away reporters at the door and kept curtains drawn day and night. She still answered fan mail, typed of course in perfect format, but only when the notes were properly respectful. Any letters that hinted at her age or past films were thrown out. One producer claimed she called him in 1974 asking about a role that didn't exist. She sounded hopeful, he said, and completely detached from reality. The woman who once demanded the spotlight now wouldn't even open the blinds. The Rosalind Russell photo didn't kill her career. That was already done, but it ended her last illusion, that she could still control how the world saw her. From this point on, Crawford was no longer a public figure. She was a myth hiding in plain sight. Alone in apartment 22G. She spent her final years in a modest apartment on Manhattan's Upper East Side, Unit 22G. It wasn't small, but it wasn't the mansion she used to host parties in either. She kept it spotless. Not just clean, sterile. Visitors said the smell of disinfectant hit you at the door. Furniture was arranged to perfection. White gloves were worn by cleaning staff. Not a fingerprint allowed. She still kept her vanity table, loaded with powders, creams, and fake eyelashes she didn't use anymore. She rarely wore makeup, rarely changed clothes, but the routine was still there. She had no live-in staff, just a rotating housekeeper and a nurse who came a few hours a day. She rarely took calls, and when she did, she demanded they keep it brief. Most of her old Hollywood friends had stopped calling anyway. She stayed up late watching her old movies on TV. She'd call the station sometimes to complain if they ran an ad break in the wrong place. Once she reportedly asked them to play Humoresque at a different hour so she could sleep after. Books lined the apartment, mostly self-help, etiquette, and old fan magazines with her on the cover. She had stacks of letters, many unopened, some from Christina. She didn't answer. Meals were delivered, groceries were ordered by phone. She insisted they be left at the front desk, no direct interaction. When staff visited, she often pretended she wasn't home. The woman who once threw legendary dinner parties now ate cottage cheese and crackers alone. She edited old clippings, cut her name out of magazines and pasted them into scrapbooks. In one, she labeled herself the last star, not in irony, in full sincerity. In 1977, she gave away her beloved Shih Tzu, Princess Lotus Blossom. She told her maid she didn't want the dog to watch her decline. 3 months later, she passed away in her bedroom. No funeral, no fanfare. She left behind wigs, perfume, and a will that would ignite a firestorm. Death, will, and the final blow. Joan Crawford died on May 10, 1977, in her Manhattan apartment. She was 73. The official cause of death was a heart attack. She had complained of fatigue the night before and passed away quietly in her bedroom. Her housekeeper found her that morning. There was no drama, no dramatic exit, just silence. She'd already planned the details. No funeral, no memorial. She didn't want mourners. She had her body cremated and her ashes placed next to her last husband, Alfred Steele, at Ferncliff Cemetery. But the peace didn't last long. When her will was read, jaws dropped. She left money to charities, to loyal staff, and to a few friends. But 2 names were notably excluded: Christina and Christopher, her 2 oldest adopted children. The line in the will was cold and direct. It is my intention to make no provision herein for my son Christopher or my daughter Christina for reasons which are well known to them. It wasn't just an omission, it was a public rejection. The press picked it up immediately. Tabloids printed the line in full. Gossip columns speculated about what the reasons could be. Hollywood insiders already knew there had been tension for years, but this felt like a final slap. Christina issued a short statement. Christopher said nothing. Friends of Crawford defended her. They said the kids were ungrateful. Others weren't so sure. By cutting them out so publicly, she opened the door for what came next. And it wasn't a tribute, it was a takedown. Christina's book was already in motion. Christina Crawford didn't wait long. She had already started writing a book before Joan died. The will just lit the match. In 1978, less than a year after her mother's death, Mommy Dearest hit bookstores. The cover was simple, just Christina's name and the words, "The story of my mother, Joan Crawford." It sold out in days. The book alleged years of physical and emotional abuse. Christina claimed she was beaten, gaslit, and terrorized over minor mistakes. The most famous story? Wire hangers. Joan allegedly flew into a rage because Christina had used the wrong kind. The image was unforgettable and deeply damaging. Critics were split. Some believed every word, others called it exaggerated. But the public didn't care. Joan Crawford, once a symbol of elegance, was now the face of celebrity cruelty. Mommy Dearest became a cultural lightning rod. It stayed on the bestseller list for months. The backlash was fast and loud. Joan's defenders, including actresses like Myrna Loy and Douglas Fairbanks Jr., called it slander. But others came forward with their own stories. Some said they'd seen Joan slap her daughter at parties. Others recalled her coldness and control. In 1981, the book was adapted into a film starring Faye Dunaway. The performance was bold, but turned Crawford into a camp icon. It wasn't a tribute. It was a caricature. Dunaway later regretted it. Christina didn't. The book didn't just stain Joan's reputation. It rewrote it. From award-winning actress to cautionary tale, Christina never apologized for writing it. She said, "I wanted the truth out, even if people didn't like it." Joan Crawford never got to respond. She died with her version of the story intact. But in the years that followed, it wasn't her version that survived. It was Christina's. One stare stopped a director cold. One scene made censors panic. And one decision nearly ended her career. Gene Simmons didn't hint. She exposed. This isn't your grandmother's Hollywood story. War-era debut with big impact. Gene Simmons was just 14 when she stepped onto a movie set for the first time. The film, Give Us the Moon. It was a light comedy, but casting directors noticed something deeper in her, a mix of innocence and edge that didn't feel rehearsed. By 1945, she landed a small role in Caesar and Cleopatra, acting opposite Vivien Leigh and Claude Rains. Jean had no formal training, but her eyes stole every frame. Even with just a few lines, critics pointed her out. One review said she had more presence than most stars twice her age. That attention didn't go unnoticed. Back in London, she was already becoming a studio favorite. Directors liked that she followed direction perfectly, but still added something of her own. No one could quite explain it. She was quiet, respectful, but then delivered a performance with a surprising heat that caught people off guard. During this time, Britain was still recovering from war. Rationing was in full swing. But Jean was getting fitted for costumes, stepping onto grand sets and showing up in magazines. For a country looking for escape, she became a symbol of post-war hope and a bit of fantasy. Producers began casting her in roles meant for older actresses. She had the look of a teenager, but the screen presence of a woman who'd lived through something. It made her unpredictable and hard to forget. The studios liked that, so did the public. What really set her apart, though, wasn't talent alone. It was how she made every close-up feel intimate. She didn't perform to the camera. She let the camera come to her. That kind of restraint, especially at 15, felt dangerous in the best way. Ophelia role that shocked all. At only 18, she was cast opposite Laurence Olivier, who also directed and starred as Hamlet. It was a bold choice. Some said she was too young, too unknown. But Olivier saw something in her others didn't. The moment the film premiered, critics couldn't stop talking. Her Ophelia was fragile but intense. The breakdown scene where she spirals into madness hit like a punch. She didn't scream or flail. She barely raised her voice, but her eyes, They told a story no one could look away from. One director on set said, "She didn't act the scene. She became it." That scene became one of the most talked about performances of the year. Some called it mesmerizing. Others said it was too much, too raw for such a young actress. The censors weren't thrilled either. They flagged her emotional scenes as too suggestive, even though she wasn't doing anything explicit. Just her face, sad, broken, and unfiltered, made people uncomfortable. Not because she did something wrong, but because she did it too well. Her performance earned her an Oscar nomination for Best Supporting Actress. It was rare for a British actress that young to get that kind of recognition in Hollywood, but Jean made it look effortless. What no one saw, though, was how tightly controlled the set was. Olivier was known to push actors hard. Simmons was often left exhausted after long takes. Some scenes took over a dozen tries just to get the right version of her breakdown. She never complained. Hamlet didn't just boost her career. It showed the world she wasn't afraid of complex roles. She didn't need flashy lines or big gestures. She used silence, stillness, and just one look. This wasn't a breakout. This was a warning. Jean Simmons didn't just belong in movies. She could change how they felt. Barefoot and bold in Himalayas. Jean Simmons wasn't the lead in Black Narcissus, but she might as well have been. She played Kanchi, a teenage girl from the Himalayas. No lines, no backstory, just movement, emotion, and presence. And it was enough to shake audiences and critics. She wore a thin sari, little makeup, and walked barefoot in most scenes. Her performance wasn't subtle. It was bold, sensual, and totally silent. For someone trained in British restraint, she went the other way completely. Viewers couldn't believe it was the same girl from Hamlet. The censors? They freaked out. A British girl in brownface was already controversial, but it was her physicality, how she walked, how she looked at men, how she moved through space, that made it feel charged. Some scenes were almost cut. Critics didn't know whether to praise her or scold her. What made it even wilder? Jean was only 19. She wasn't experienced in dance or physical theater. She learned everything on the spot, guided by directors Powell and Pressburger. They told her, "Don't think, just feel." And she did. The result was magnetic. Behind the scenes, Simmons was nervous. She worried about looking ridiculous. She hated the heavy body makeup. But when she saw the final cut, she realized she'd done something rare. She made people watch without saying a word. Her performance added tension to a film already full of it. Nuns fighting desire, isolation in the mountains, repressed emotions ready to blow. Jean's character was the spark, the reminder that human want couldn't be hidden forever. She wasn't glamorized. She wasn't polished. She was raw and young and almost too real for the screen. Audiences either gasped or looked away. That role changed everything. From then on, casting directors saw her differently. She could play quiet, yes, but she could also play dangerous. Not loud or messy, but the kind of dangerous that sneaks up on you. Marriage that silenced her voice. She married Stuart Granger in 1950. On paper, it looked like a Hollywood love story. He was a big name. She was the rising star. The press called them elegant, glamorous, perfect. But the truth behind the curtain was less romantic and a lot more complicated. Granger was 16 years older. He was already famous when Jean met him on set. Their chemistry started fast. So did the control. Soon after the wedding, Granger took the reins. On decisions, on deals, even on what roles she took. The studios loved the image. They paraded the couple in magazines. But people close to Jean started noticing changes. She lost weight. She got quieter on set. Her fire was still there, but it felt dimmed. Granger didn't hide his jealousy. He hated how much attention Jean got. When she was offered lead roles, he often stepped in, saying the scripts weren't right for her. Some insiders say he even turned down roles on her behalf without telling her. Their marriage became a talking point, not for romance, but for the tension it created in her career. One studio exec said, "Jean was gold, but we couldn't get to her without going through Stuart." Still, she stayed, at least for a while. She did interviews with a smile. She played the devoted wife. But behind closed doors, she started pushing back. She wanted control over her own contracts. She wanted to work in America. Granger wasn't happy about it. The tension spilled into work. On the set of Young Bess, she reportedly clashed with crew members over last-minute changes made by Granger, who was constantly advising from behind the scenes. By the early 50s, it was clear this marriage wasn't boosting her career, it was stalling it, and Jean knew it. The girl who once shocked the screen in silence was now fighting to speak up off it. She sued Howard Hughes. Howard Hughes didn't hear no very often, but Gene Simmons gave it to him clear, firm, and without a pause. In 1951, she was under contract with the Rank organization in the UK, but Hughes wanted her for RKO in Hollywood, so he bought her contract. At first, it looked like a career jackpot. Bigger films, bigger budget, international stardom. But there was a catch. Hughes didn't want to make her a star. He wanted to own her. He sent her lavish gifts, jewelry, perfume, clothes. She sent them right back. He offered her roles, but only in projects he controlled. Scripts were delayed, promises were broken. Jean was stuck, contractually tied to RKO but barely working. Then came the final straw. Hughes tried to force her into a long-term extension. Jean said no. He pushed harder. She pushed back and sued him. That was a career gamble very few actresses would have dared to make, especially against a man with Hughes' power and reach. The court battle was ugly. She was accused of being ungrateful, difficult, spoiled, but she didn't flinch. Her attorney argued Hughes was deliberately obstructing her career, and he was. The judge sided with Jean. The court granted her the right to make one more film under RKO, but after that, she was free. That final film would be Angel Face. More on that next. The whole ordeal made headlines. Jean had taken on one of Hollywood's biggest moguls, and won. What made it wild wasn't just that she fought back, it was how calm she stayed doing it. No public outbursts, no gossip columns, just quiet, steady defiance. After the case, other actresses started to take note. Simmons had done what they were told was impossible. She stood up to the system without destroying herself in the process. Slip dress scene that stung. Angel Face was supposed to be just another noir, but Gene Simmons turned it into something unforgettable and nearly unwatchable for the censors. Directed by Otto Preminger, the film paired her with Robert Mitchum in a twisted love story full of mind games and manipulation. From her first scene, something felt off. In a good way, she wore a silk slip and moved through the frame like she knew exactly how much control she had. It was quiet, calculated, dangerous. Preminger pushed her hard. Some days, she left set in tears. One scene, where she slaps Mitchum, turned chaotic. He slapped her back, for real, not in the script. The camera kept rolling. That take made it into the final cut. The most talked about scene was filmed in her bedroom. Jean wore a skimpy nightgown that barely passed code. Her expression? Cold, unreadable, hypnotic. Studio executives tried to reshoot it. Preminger refused. Simmons never apologized. The scene stayed. Critics weren't sure what to make of her. One said she was too still, too unreadable. Another called her performance the quietest form of violence ever filmed. Audiences didn't know whether to root for her or run from her. That's exactly what Preminger wanted. Off-screen, Simmons kept it professional, but distant. She didn't like Preminger's style, but she respected the result. "It wasn't fun," she once said, but it worked. She knew what the role demanded, and she gave it, without blinking. Angel Face didn't do big box office, but it became a cult classic. Directors studied it, actresses copied her stillness, and fans replayed that one-bedroom scene like it was gospel. It proved she could lead a film, and terrify you doing it. This wasn't Gene Simmons the ingenue, this was Gene Simmons with teeth, and once you saw it, you couldn't unsee it. Backless photos stirred a storm. The robe was supposed to be a biblical epic, clean, reverent, traditional, but Gene Simmons made sure it came with a side of scandal. Not because of anything in the script, but because of a single photograph. A promotional shot of Simmons in costume, barebacked, turned slightly, eyes locked on the lens, made its way into a national magazine. And suddenly people weren't talking about Roman history. They were talking about that image. She wasn't unclothed, but she didn't need to be. The curve of her back, the look on her face, it was suggestive without trying. It sparked a wave of backlash from conservative groups. Some theaters threatened to pull the film unless the image was censored. The studio quickly ordered retouched versions covering her back with added fabric. Simmons didn't protest. She also didn't apologize. What most people didn't know was that the robe marked the beginning of her freedom. It was her first film after winning her legal battle with Howard Hughes and RKO. No more interference, no more stalled scripts. She was finally in control of her career, or so she thought. Behind the scenes, she was still untangling contract fallout. Though legally free, industry politics meant many producers were hesitant to cast her right away. Her refusal to play by studio rules made her difficult. So even as The Robe became a box office hit, Jean was still proving she was bankable and independent. She was also stepping into a new kind of role, the strong, morally complex woman. No longer the wide-eyed ingenue, she now played characters torn by faith, loyalty, and quiet desire. That's what made her stand out in The Robe. While others delivered grand speeches, Jean did more with a glance or a pause. Staring down Spartacus with fire. By the mid-1950s, Jean Simmons had mastered the art of subtle danger. She didn't have to raise her voice or storm into a room to command attention. One stare from her could flip the energy of an entire scene, and nowhere was that more obvious than in Spartacus. She played Varinia, strong-willed, patient, deeply loving. But she wasn't just the love interest. She was the emotional core of the film, the quiet resistance behind Spartacus's rebellion. When Kirk Douglas's character meets her, she doesn't beg or flirt. She watches, she listens, and that look, equal parts softness and defiance, spoke volumes. The film was massive, huge budget, massive cast, but Simmons never got lost in the crowd. Even surrounded by warriors and senators, her presence held steady. One key scene in a bathhouse, fully clothed but emotionally bare, had audiences holding their breath. She wasn't there to seduce, but somehow she did. Director Stanley Kubrick said she could do more with silence than most actors could with 3 pages of dialogue. And that was true. She didn't rely on flashy performances. Her strength was restraint, holding back just enough to make viewers lean in. Her chemistry with Douglas was real, on screen at least. Off-screen, things were more tense. Douglas, ever the perfectionist, reportedly tried to direct her at times. Jean didn't bite. She followed Kubrick's lead and stuck to her style, one that didn't need constant rehearsal or rewrites, just space to breathe. What made Spartacus different was that it showed how far she had come. She was no longer being told how to act, dress, or behave. She chose this role, and she shaped it into something bigger than what was on the page. By now, Simmons had developed a signature move, holding the camera's gaze just a second too long. It was never overdone. Just enough to make the audience shift in their seats. That was her gift. Making discomfort feel beautiful. Making modesty feel provocative. Post-divorce roles, no apologies. When Jean Simmons divorced Stuart Granger in 1960, Hollywood expected her to fade into the background. Instead, she did the opposite. She stepped into some of the boldest roles of her career. She wasn't trying to shock anyone, but she was finally calling the shots. And the first move? Elmer Gantry. In the film, she played Sister Sharon Falconer, a preacher with power, mystery, and unshakable confidence. Opposite Burt Lancaster, Simmons didn't flinch. Their chemistry felt electric, even hostile at times. Her character wasn't there to be conquered. She had her own mission and her own secrets. The role marked a shift. This was Jean fully in control. No studio head pulling strings, no husband weighing in, and it showed. Critics called her performance chillingly calm and quietly commanding. Audiences saw a version of Simmons they hadn't before, fierce, focused, and completely in her element. After that, the walls came down. In interviews, she started to speak more candidly. She admitted how controlled her earlier career had been. She talked about being dressed like a doll, told where to sit, when to smile. "I wasn't rebellious," she said, "I just had a brain." She also started choosing roles that mirrored her real-life complexity. In Life at the Top, she played a woman trapped in a cold marriage, giving one of her most emotionally raw performances. Critics noted how much pain she conveyed without raising her voice. Simmons had always known how to make silence speak, but now it screamed. By 1964, she had officially left her ingenue past behind. Her new characters were layered, modern, and sometimes bitter, but never weak. Whether playing women burned by love or cornered by power, Simmons always brought a sharp, grounded realism. Her personal life, she kept it quiet, no tabloid stunts, just work, and that work spoke volumes. Gene Simmons had survived the studio system, defied Hollywood men, and walked away from a toxic marriage. What came next wasn't a comeback, it was her full arrival. TV role that changed everything. In 1983, when most of her peers had faded into cameos or early retirement, Gene Simmons made a move that surprised everyone. She went to television. And not just any TV role. She signed on for The Thornbirds, a sweeping, high-stakes miniseries that would become a cultural event. She played Fiona Cleary, the cold, emotionally distant matriarch of the family. It was a huge shift from the warm, gentle characters people associated with Simmons. Fiona wasn't cruel, but she wasn't loving either. She was closed off, wounded, and quietly ruthless. And Gene played her with absolute control. Audiences didn't just watch The Thornbirds, they devoured it. Nearly 100 million people tuned in. Simmons held her ground against heavy hitters like Richard Chamberlain and Barbara Stanwyck. And in some scenes, she stole the spotlight entirely. It wasn't just the lines she delivered, it was how she sat, how she paused, how she looked away at just the right second. For that performance, she won the Emmy. But more than that, she won back visibility. She proved that actresses over 50 weren't just background players. They could lead, they could drive a story, and they could be just as bold, if not bolder, than they'd been decades earlier. Behind the scenes, Simmons was calm, professional, and laser-focused. Younger cast members described her as gracious but guarded. She wasn't there for gossip, she was there to work. One crew member recalled, "She'd walk onto set, say almost nothing, and nail it on the first take." That role capped off her transformation, from teenage ingenue to Hollywood rebel, from silent power to full-on matriarch. She had nothing left to prove, but somehow still delivered performances that left audiences stunned. Gene Simmons didn't reinvent herself, she just kept showing up exactly as she was, smart, subtle, and impossible to ignore. And by the time The Thornbirds aired, one thing was clear. She never needed to scream to make the whole room gasp.